Finding X and Y-intercepts, the basics. In this video, we will focus on finding the X and the Y-intercepts when the equation is in standard form or general form. And why, you might ask, why will we focus on those two? Because there is no method that is more efficient to graph a line when it's in standard form or general form than to use the X and the Y-intercepts. And I want you to take a note of this. There's one exception, and that's when both the X and Y-intercepts are the origin. They're both 0, 0. That's 1 point. You can't graph a line from 1 point. So to graph that line, if the origin was the intercept for both the X and Y axis, then you choose a value for either X or Y and then solve for the other one. So if I let X be 1, solve for Y, or let Y be 7 and solve for X, whatever you want to do, okay? So that you can obtain a second ordered pair besides just the origin. Standard form, recall, is AX plus BY equals C, where A and B are both not 0. That's the case for general form as well. A and B are not both 0. But general form is AX plus BY plus C equals 0. So basically, the C is over here. You're just moving it over for general. If I start in general form, I'm going to move the C to this side so I have it in standard form because it's a little easier to find intercepts the way I do it with it in standard form. So again, when I'm given general form, I simply move the C to the other side, and then I have it in standard form. So here, to find an intercept in any equation or function, set all the other variables to 0 and solve. In particular, with linear functions or equations, to find the X-intercept, the first thing we do is we let Y equal 0. That's all the other variables. There's only X and Y. Okay? And once you let Y equal 0, you solve for X. And your X-intercept is a point in the form some number comma 0, where that number is the solution from step 2 above. Okay? So when you solve for X, whatever number you get is what goes there. So 4 comma 0, or 7 comma 0, or negative 1/2 comma 0. The Y-intercept is the same thing. Let X equal 0, solve for Y, and then the Y-intercept is the point 0 comma whatever number you find when you solve for Y. All right. So find the X and Y-intercepts of the following equations. 3X minus 4Y equals negative 12. No, that's the direction for all of them. Directions for all of them, and I'm just doing one per page here. So 3X minus 4Y equals negative 12. So how do I find the X-intercept? So let's go here. X-intercept. How do I find it? Number 1, let Y equal 0. So if Y is 0, I can put, right, because this is the form X comma Y is the point, right? So plug in 0 for Y. So 2, this thing is solve for X, right? So 3X minus 4 times 0 equals negative 12. Well, 3X minus, that becomes 0, right? Equals negative 12. What is 3X minus 0? That's 3X equals negative 12. Then we divide both sides by 3, and we get X is equal to negative 4. So that's the proper way to go through doing this, okay? And then I used to go through and I used to do the same thing properly for this other one. I say, so for the Y-intercept, I let X equal 0. So if that's the case, X, right, because it's XY. And then the second step is to solve for Y. So 3 times 0 minus 4Y equals negative 12. And 3 times 0 is 0, so 0 minus 4Y is negative 12. Well, that's just negative 4Y is equal to negative 12, right? Divide both sides by negative 4. And Y equals 3. So 0, 3 is the Y-intercept. And I was doing this early in my career. I did this every time. And this is a little weird for one of these videos, but I'm going to introduce you to one of my former students. We're going to call him BJ. And so BJ was in one of my larger classes, maybe 50, 60, 70 students in that class. It was a basic freshman level math class. And BJ had one objective, and that was to get a phone number of any girl in the room and go out with him if they would go out with him. And so he would sit by a different girl each day and try to get her digits, as we called it back then. And so I thought, I'm going to get BJ because he was making, C's in my class, maybe a B every now and then, and I thought he was slacking. And so I said, I'm going to get BJ. I'm going to get him to come up to the board and work one of these for me because he's not paying attention. He's trying to get her phone number right now. So I call him up to the front. And so BJ walks up to the front of the room, and he's going to work the same problem here. He says, hi, I'm BJ. There's his little red curly hair, right? He says, and so he asked the class, how do we find the X-intercepts? And they thought he was just going to do it. So then he kind of did the little come here thing with his hand and was like, no, answer me. How do you find the X-intercepts? And they said, let Y equal 0. And he said, that's right. We let Y equal 0. he said, write 0 in the y for the x-intercept. So he wrote 0 in here. Okay, moving right along. He said, if y equals 0, what is negative 4 times 0? He's talking about right here, right? If I plug in 0 right here for y, what happens? Well, negative 4 times 0, yep, it's 0. He said, so if it's 0, then it's not really there. Basically, he said, hey, you can just kind of forget about this because if it's 0, it's gone. All right, and so what he did was he covered it up. He said, if it's not there, just cover it up. He put his hand up there and covered it up. And so then he says, okay, this gives us 3x equals negative 12. So just divide both sides by 3. He's saying that if that's my equation now, if I forget about the other term, I just divide both sides by 3, right? That's what BJ said do. So then negative 12 divided by 3 is what? Negative 4. So the x-intercept is negative 4, and he wrote that here. So he's got his point negative 4 comma 0, right? That's what BJ did. So the thing that I've added to this, he didn't write this down, but he did say it that way, was negative 12 over 3. I would write that right above that so you would see it there, okay? I would write that right above it and say, okay, that's where I'm getting the negative 4 from. And notice the thing I'm looking for is the x-intercept, and I'm dividing this number by itself by the coefficient of x, right? So then BJ says, okay, now class, how do we find the y-intercept? And, of course, he made him say, let x equal 0. So then he put his 0 in right there, right? He said 3 times 0 equals 0, right? So now he's plugging this 0 in here, and he's getting 0 and saying that's really no good anymore, right? It's 0. So cover up the 3x this time, but be careful. He actually said this, y'all. The one I gave him had a negative on the y like this. He said cover up the 3x, but be careful not to cover up the negative. He said that. The guy that I thought was slacking, not paying attention, right? It goes with the 4y. The negative sign goes with the 4y. And so he said, okay, what do you do now? Now divide both sides by negative 4, right? You're dividing this by negative 4 because this thing over here is gone now, right? So if you divide it by negative 4, negative 12 divided by negative 4 is what? 3. Negative 12 divided by negative 4 is 3. So then he put a 3 right here. So the y-intercept is 3. All right. So before we move on, I told you I thought BJ was a slacker, right, making C's and B's. And obviously, a lot of my students like what I have become known to call as BJ's method there on that. And look, full disclosure here, I'm sure he had a teacher show him that, and somebody made that up and covered that up and all this other stuff. And it's really their method, and that's fine. I want to give them due credit. So it's not BJ didn't come up with this. Right? It's just what he did, and that's not what I did, and I saw it, and I liked it, and my students liked it, so that's kind of what we do now. We cover things up, and so what I'm going to do is sort of cover it up on here, and we'll talk about what each the X and the Y are, and if you want to go through and properly do it like I did it first, that's fine. If that's what you need to do, please do that. All right? So, but what happened, BJ, later that semester in another class, he met a girl he actually liked a lot, and she said yes, gave me her phone number, and they went out, and they went out again, and went out again. And so about the middle of the next semester, he's, bebopping along, making his B's and C's, just doing enough to get by. And she sat him down and she said, BJ, one of two things is going to happen. We're going to either keep dating and get married, or we're going to break up. If you like me and want to keep dating, get your act together and make better grades. BJ turned into a 4.0 student. I kid you not. Not a single B, C, D, F, nothing after that but an A. Went to law school. Dude got a 4.0 in law school as well. You say, what happened to the girl? He's married to her. Last I checked, they had one daughter. Probably have more kids now. It's the same girl. He liked her a lot. They kept dating, got married because he cleaned his act up and started making A's. That's how, teacher, we know this thing about, we can tell if you're slacking, but she proved it and said, hey, get it together. 4.0 law student. Yeah, practicing lawyer now. All right, so BJ's method. So we're going to do that. We're going to use that method just because it's shorter, and a lot of my students seem to like it. But you got to keep up with what you're doing, right? If you're finding the x-intercept, you're dividing by the coefficient of x. If you're finding the y-intercept, you're dividing by the coefficient of y. And don't forget the negative goes with what comes after it. So when you cover something up. So here, the x-intercept. So for the x-intercept, you let y equal 0. For the y-intercept, you let x equal 0. That you can get half of your answer before you do anything else. zeros, right? So if y is 0 for the x-intercept, we're going to cover this up. And if I cover that up, then I have x equals 14. There's really nothing to do here, but the coefficient is 1. So I like to at least write 14 over 1 is 14. But really, look, it said x equals 14 to start with. There it is, right? So you're done with that one. The other one, if x is there, you cover the x up. So I don't have you can't see my hand, so I'm just going to scribble through it and cover it up. So if negative 7y equals 14, then we're going to divide 14 by what? Negative 7 and get what? Negative 2. Negative 2. And that's what BJ's method is right there. Okay? So 14 over 1 is 14. 14 over negative 7 is negative 2. (4x minus 3y minus 24 equals 0). This is not in standard form. This is in that general form. So remember, there was a little note at the bottom of that page. I said when it's in general form, I'm going to take this and move it to the other side. So how do I do that? I'm going to add 24 to both sides. So this is going to require a little step here. 4x minus 3y equals 24. You don't have to do that. I just think it's a little simpler to take care of to go ahead and move that over. That way when I plug the 0 in, I'm literally just dividing a number and I'm done, as opposed to having to move something over, then divide or whatever. So 4x minus 3y equals 24. For the x-intercept, let y equal 0. For the y-intercept, let x equal 0. Now let's go back. The y is 0 for the x-intercept. I'm going to cover this up. Okay, I'm going to cover that up. In fact, I think I can fix this. We'll see. We'll come back if I can't. So then we're going to say what? 24 divided by what? 24 divided by 4, which is 6 for the x-intercept. Yeah, there we go. So then what about the y-intercept? Well, we let x equal 0. So we're going to cover this up. And we're left with 24 equals, or negative 3y equals 24. So we're going to say 24 divided by negative 3, which is negative 8. So then the y-intercept is 0, negative 8. But again, the first thing I did there when it was in general form was I moved my negative 24 over on a side by itself, just because it makes this method a little more streamlined in my opinion. So 5x minus 6y equals 30. So again, x-intercept, the y is 0, y-intercept, the x is 0. So if I want to go find the x-intercept, I say y is 0. So I'm going to cover this up. So I'm covering it up. 5x equals 30. So you're going to say what? 30 divided by what? 5, which is 6. So the x-intercept there is 6, 0. What about the y-intercept? Well, if x is 0, we're going to cover this up. And we get negative 6y equals 30. So we say 30 over what? Negative 6. Positive over negative. Negative 30 over 6 is 5. So that's negative 5. Negative 5 there. And again, if you need to, go through the entire thing. Moving putting in 0 for the x, putting in 0 for the y, solving, whatever you need to do for those. But if you have BJ's method down pat, use it. So here, again, it's in general form, so I'm going to move this over. How do I move it over? I'm going to add 27 to both sides. I get 9x minus y equals 27. So for the x-intercept, we let y equal 0. We'll cover my y up. And I get 9x equals 27. That's going to be 27 over 9, right, when I divide, which is going to be 3. It's going to be 3. So what about the y-intercept? That's when we let x equal 0. And if x is 0, we cover this up, right? And we get negative y equals 27. So we're going to divide 27 by negative 1. Right? The coefficient of y there is negative 1. When you have a minus, there's a negative, and if there's nothing there, it's understood to be a 1. So that's going to be negative 27 there for the coefficient. For the y-intercept. The coefficient was negative 1 of y, right? But the y-intercept was negative 27, or 0, negative 27. So again, we started with general form. I moved the number over, the c over, and got the standard form. 5x minus 3y equals negative 30. So here, the x-intercept, we're going to let y equal 0. So if y is 0, we're going to cover this up. We get 5x equals negative 30. So we have negative 30 divided by 5 is what? Negative 6. Negative 6. And then for the y-intercept, we're going to let x equal 0. So then we're going to cover this up. 5 times 0 is 0, right? That's gone. So negative 3y equals negative 30. So we divide negative 30 by what? Right, we're going to divide both sides by negative 3, right? Negative 30 over negative 3 is positive 10, a positive 10. So the x-intercept here is negative 6, 0, and the y-intercept is 0, 10. All right, I hope this helps with finding x and y intercepts because you will use those to graph lines and do other things.